I don't necessarily claim to have founded their work on, or art practices on sustainable principles, but incidentally each of them have created projects that in some way embrace aspects of sustainability. I'd like to welcome firstly Lynda and Ceri Hann of Public Assembly, an ongoing collaboration between the two artists. Public Assembly is a live lab that explores creative thinking through action at the intersection of art, design and education. Public Assembly projects include workshops, public interventions and playful low-tech installations. These projects are often situated in transitional zones of public life and involve the making of objects and wearable artefacts to exchange in conversation.
Ceri and I started collaborating in 2007, and what we're going to do is run through some of the key projects that we've worked on over the last, how many years is that?
What's that, 2007?
Actually some illumination and a timer. So apologies if my, okay. All right. And we are going to keep following.
That's kind of a difficult image to see, but what is it? It's a barrel vault in a disused armoury that was in Sydney that had like a, what is it, 17-second reverb. It was an incredible space, but it was, it got transformed. How did you come to be going first?
So we both arrived at Public Assembly with from very different disciplines, and now there's kind of a crossover point. My background is in architecture, and I moved into working in the public realm and also making through working on festivals. And this was a festival at Newington Armoury in Sydney, and what was interesting here was working with historic sites. So working with spaces where you're kind of creating temporary layers that were reversible, that didn't make an impact on the space, but also celebrating the community that existed already on that side in the sense of what had happened before, but also a temporary community that was happening within a festival. So this was actually working with a choir.
There's a difficult time. Yeah, sorry, Hann.
Yeah, that's okay.
So that part of that, there was a choir that's part of this about setting up spaces that enable for unforeseen, serendipitous, spontaneous things to happen.
Yeah.
This is one of the other vaults. It's very difficult to see in these conditions, but this is where like the use of the faculty of the imagination might be.
Yeah, maybe.
And,
love it.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, not really.
But basically, this
yeah.
Oh, that's
the other way.
But anyway, basically, this is a. So basically, these vaults were used for like storing gunpowder with ships that were coming to Port Jackson, and so I made all these strobe projectors out of army ammunition boxes, and these would strobe kind of quite sequences of images as people would come in and trigger up.
And these photos came from festival goers. So we set up a photo gallery where people provided photographs. So we were creating frameworks which enabled participants or work to be re-displayed throughout the 3-day festival. But this was a result of actually doing arts and decor for festivals and then throwing out a whole lot of rubbish at the end of a 3-day debauch, weekend. So it was about powering it right back to just light and sound, so very ephemeral pieces of architecture in a way, but also creating things that enable participation and engagement. And this then moved on to, and this is going to be very interesting to see, look, that's working. So that's kind of the meeting point, so where Ceri and I started doing projects together.
It's interesting you should say that things kicked off from things being thrown out. Like we always enjoyed going along to the trash and treasure market. One afternoon after having gone to the Campbell market, there was an old accordion that someone had left, it was trashed, it was left in the gutter. So we brought that home and sort of pulled it apart and created a necklace from it. And it was like, hang on, what are we doing, like making this back here after the market? Like, why not go, make at the market?
So what you maybe can't see, but just here at the bottom, is that Ceri found out of a skip bin 2 1960s shopping trolleys that are like miniature shopping trolleys. So this was the days of miniature basket shops. And we turned them into jewellery benches. So they have pegs and they kind of flip up and then become a display space for works that are made in situ and are also sold by donation. And we've got some examples of, do you want to?
there's just a picture of me being happy, but I'll just say, maybe an example of some of the things. So this is the kind of so this is like, I don't know if that's easy to see, but basically, yeah, it's a poodle that's been chopped in half and then rearranged. So it's a dog in search of God. So basically, these are, I approach some of these things in a playful way. As you can see, like basically you've got thousands of people walking past throughout the morning. And the best way to talk with the interesting people is to put interesting things on the stall, and it's like a lobster trap for interesting conversations that take place.
But it's also working with pre-existing social interactions that are already happening at the market. So you're kind of already working with that we're working with existing conditions. So for me, because we have very different approaches to practice, so my kind of things that I make, being unfortunately I can't escape the architectural design part of me, is reinterpreting sound objects and then kind of putting out on display works that actually resonate in terms of memory or in terms of form. So it's kind of a very different approach to Ceri, which yours pieces are more like philosophical mind jamming.
Yeah, but they're all they all seem to have a similar outcome in that they result in us having some much deeper conversations with people than we otherwise would, which is just been a great thing over the last however many years that has been. It's quite a thing now.
And so this is This is actually a Fresnel lens from a laptop screen. So it's about disassembly, working in situ, pulling something apart basically finding really cheap objects, pulling them apart on site, and then remaking them over the course of the whole market, and then selling them by donation. And that in itself is a bit mind jamming for people too. So what we do though, as part of that, is that we document, and we have kind of a Hall of Fame which we have clipped onto the side of a shopping trolley, where we have a catalogue, basically a gallery of all the pieces we've ever made over the 3.5 to 4 years that we've actually sat at the market, and people can see themselves. So what we find now is people come back and try and find themselves on the loop, and then they'll get their kids, and then their kids get dragged, the kids drag mum and dad back to find themselves in the loop. So there's this sense of a community and an ongoing conversation that occurs through those objects.
Sometimes instigates conversations with people beyond our stall, because the people who are running to each other that have obviously bought a piece of jewellery that is from our stall, and actually be able to talk with people that were previously strangers.
And talking about conversations, we're going to talk now about another project where we've scaled up those objects. And we were asked by an arts consultancy called, is it Public Matter or?
At that stage it was
I love it.
Anyway, it's now Public Matter, but
cultural value.
Cultural value, but it's basically there was a certain amount of money available for a small community in Moreland to get a public artwork made for their area, which was the Gowan Break, and it was kind of like part of the process, or this is part of the process of how would you describe it?
To get input about a permanent public artwork. So it was the shifting in scale to try and get a very enclosed, quite an insular community to start talking to each other about a new community centre and an associated public artwork that was going to be installed.
Which resulted in using this.
Yeah, so we utilise pre-existing survey devices. So this is a new suburb that's opening up. A lot of houses are still under construction, so we kind of use surveying devices and taping devices.
Sure, I'm actually the son of a surveyor. I spent almost since I was a very young child, holding the dumb end of a tape. So the best ever of these surveying devices have been pulled out of the garden shed. To the bane of Ceri's mum, who's just up the back. But this was about looking within. So the objects and the surveying devices, some of them actually were reflective devices that looked so you actually saw yourself, or you had very specific things that focused on things within the Gowan Brae space itself or the community, or they were outward. So it's a really interesting landscape. So one of the interesting things about it is that this particular one, which is in terms of looking into the future, there it is. Yeah, exactly. It's like one of the interesting things that comes about when you start asking more than one person what the future holds. It starts to look a bit more like that, which is like like you start to realise the fragmented nature of everyone's opinion on what should happen. That's where the name of public assembly is quite interesting. It's quite paradoxical because as soon as you've got more than one person actually thinking about what should happen, it becomes political.
And talking of which, this is talking about trying to gather opinion. We were asked to develop 2 projects in kind of working separately, but as part of the 7,000 Oaks Festival, which was located, the public art component of that festival was at the City Square. And for us, this was a festival focused around sustainability. And it's very difficult to consider, if you're going to create a work that's really thinking about sustainability, well, the last thing you want to do is be consuming materials or more materials in the process of making that work. So we were having this big jam about what do we do? And so again, it was about using very ephemeral materials that already existed on the site.
This particular one was a radio broadcast, so using like the medium of radio and some recycled radios that are all on stalks. And one of the interesting things, because there's multiple stalks of these little radios, but they were really had to be tuned in. So this metaphor of there's just another object for contemplation. The difficulty of having a say when you want to have a say, it's like it seems like the whistle is always locked. But anyway, but basically this idea of this forest of little radios that kept drifting. They kept drifting out of because they'd all have to be tuned in to kind of to receive the signal of the broadcast. And there's this metaphor of like how we're all constantly being tuned in to like mass media or and retuned and get back on message. Yeah, well, maybe we should. Yes. But then the other part of this was I thought, what can we do in the city square that's not going to be dumping a whole lot of stuff in there that's actually going to be show up some of these things and I guess that's it has some message about the environmental footprint. And
that is great.
And isn't going to be tippy-toeing around the subject and I like this idea of the eco stiletto, we're we've got a really small footprint now, but it's really sort of somewhere over in China and pushing down really hard. But anyway, that led to developing breaks out of discarded parking signs. The one in the city square. So
this was the second project, and this has now been presented a number of times. So first of all, it was I always get public city circle or
social circle
city square. And Ceri developed. So there's granitic ground plane at the city square, and Ceri raked the city square ground plane into a Zen garden with people. Yeah. And then we scaled that up for Sculpture by the Sea, where we thought, let's take on the whole of Tamarama Beach as a Zen garden.
There it is.
But the thing there isn't about reusing found objects. Where do you want to talk about science?
Well, I think one of the things that came about in the city square is that I hadn't really thought about the signification or I just thought, okay, how do I make a really inexpensive rake that you can rake into the ground? And a couple of months earlier, I was speaking to the guy who swaps around the parking signs. And he had this pile of aluminium parking signs. I was like, what are you doing with those? And he's like, we throw them in the bin when we get back to sleep. And I was like, it is into a skip that gets melted down, of course. But I thought, well, hang on, that'd be a lot of fun to make sculptures out of them. But then I ended up making a zigzag out of them, and there's this idea of the parking sign on a broomstick. And when you turn it upside down, you're basically turning upside down authority. And so there's sort of fun of actually being able to make your own mark in the city square by using the signs that tell you, this is not your space and you're going to have to pay for it. Was actually quite an interesting one, and that sort of played a role into this beach project as well, which is, look at all that fun that people are having.
So there were 2 parts of the project. One was a really massive scale where we'd get up at dawn and we would rake Tamarama Beach at a durational work, and then it would disappear within literally 15 minutes as someone walked across it. So this happened the year after the tsunami, so there was a whole lot of things about representing landscape and destruction and you know, the ephemeral nature of landscape and
it's also that realisation of your own footprint. You know, like you have to almost through the act of becoming aware of well, actually, this is another little thing. This I don't know if that's easy to see, but it's basically a.
But the other part was during peak weekends, we would.
It's a little Monopoly house with its sides chewed out, but it's a which is like a fourth wall, and you know the idea of cinema, sorry not cinema, the theatre when you break the fourth wall, is sort of one where the performer becomes aware makes themselves aware to the people that are watching that it's a performance, and in a way that's what was happening with this. Like people become aware of the through doing this that they're actually performing in public space, and it becomes quite a liberating experience to be performing an artistic gesture in the midst of the public, and it's that feeling which is the artwork. All the other stuff's just incidental.
And talking about making work, we do run workshops as well, and this was a workshop that we ran with young people through Signal, which is a great organisation that's run by the City of Melbourne. And we were asked to actually develop a workshop for young people in the city library, and we wanted to work with, again, it was about what exists in the library, well, knowledge systems and structures, and the Dewey Decimal System, and how knowledge systems are set up, but also the fact that there are books, of course, but also the fact that particularly in city councils, they weed their books. So if a book isn't taken out every 3 years, it's actually not thrown out, but it's taken out of the collection. And if a book doesn't find a home, then it normally gets distributed, but then it might go to recycling, or so it was about trying to highlight the fact that happens and to creatively reuse those books. And
that partly came from at the Camberwell Market finding a guillotine that could slice through books. So, at one of the universities that will still remain unnamed.
Let's just get a full picture of that.
Oh, okay. Is that they're actually constantly under a process of weeding the library, and so I've been sort of slicing through books and handing them back to the library through like as doorstops. Actually, it's an architectural project. and that's part of the knowledge center thing a little bit.
But anyway, that's about modification of objects. So a big part of Ceri's practice is about modifying objects and the power of objects being modified.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, well, no, that's just okay. It's good to leave some enigmatic things in there that's follow up on. And anyway, this is an example of one of the artworks that was created through that, and what was interesting about it flipped the gallery and gallery space in the City Library into an information about the artworks which you then found in the collection. So they were actually became catalogued.
So, which meant that the gallery itself became a catalogue of works, and we asked participants to recategorise their new artworks, and we put them back on the shelves. So you could either seek them out, or people would chance upon them on the library shelves. And it was great because people really jammed the knowledge systems through that.
And really, last
I know, I've got 46 seconds, oh my god! Okay, so last project we're going to talk about is Ceri light jamming lights at City Square.
Which came from a bigger project that Lynda did.
Which is called the Interventions Guide to Melbourne, which Cas Dining, Small City 4 was part of. Where you're kind of utilising
it's basically, you've got uplights that are constantly on in the city, uplighting the trees and things. This is just an old 44-gallon drum, cut the bottom out of it, put a cellophane in the bottom, and it just basically looked like a fire. So you could actually gather around it, and I call it the Barrel of Monkeys philosophy department. And it was sort of a little bit of a dig at the universities having like
stripping out their philosophy departments.
Yeah, but anyway.
And that's us.
That's us.
But lastly,
this is the current project.
We bought a 1979 Bedford ice cream van, and it is really interesting because we had big dilemmas around consumption of materials in the vehicle, and that whole thing around we're going to consume fuel, and thank goodness it's gas powered, but it hasn't a solar system that. We're going. This is the fact that we live in a one-bedroom tiny studio kind of flat, and this is our studio space, and we hope to activate the city jamming and doing interesting projects out of. And we hope that we can offer it to other artists to work out of as well. So that's us.
Well, thank you.